where you scream to watch that, watch this, and I'll dive down through this hairy flesh.
Hi, and welcome to Watch This. I'm CJ Johnson. Jim Flanagan is back, and we are going to discuss Alien Covenant and the career of Sir Ridley Scott.
What happened here?
For my money, and just to put you in context, if you'd only ever made the Apple 1984 advertisement, your place in history would kind of be assured. If you'd only made Alien, if you'd only made Blade Runner, if you'd only made Gladiator, if you'd only made Thelma and Louise. But what about if you've made all of these and 20 other feature films? He's made 24 theatrically released cinematic feature films. He has produced 122 things. That's how many producer credits he's got on IMDb. As I said, he's 80, he's a knight, and he's released Alien Covenant for us to enjoy. Jim's seen it, I've seen it, we're going to talk about it, and Sir Ridley. Hi, Jim.
Hey, CJ, how you doing?
So Alien Covenant
Yep.
is, I don't know what number it is if you include all the Alien versus Predator movies, but it's the third Alien film that Ridley Scott has directed. He directed Alien in 1979.
Yep.
He directed Alien Prometheus in 2012, 5 years ago now,
Yep.
and now he comes back with Alien Covenant. I'll let you go first about your opinion of Alien Covenant, but I will set it up by just saying that what it feels to me like he did in 2012 with Alien Prometheus was he took this franchise, he took this universe that had gotten out of his control and become a B-grade thing with Aliens versus Predators movies and wrenched it back for himself and put it back into a sort of A-list, art house, proper movie thing.
Yeah, and I think we need to start the conversation by framing Ridley Scott's career a bit.
Okay.
And I agree. And I was hugely excited pre the release of Prometheus because of those reasons. It was very much Ridley regaining control of his baby that he created in 1979. And I'm a massive Ridley Scott fan. I think he's one of the absolute preeminent visual cinema stylists of the last 50 years.
Yeah, he's not only one of the greatest, but he's one of the influences.
Yeah, he absolutely.
Like modern film looks like it does today, partly
Yes.
because of him.
And I think when he's gone, we'll realise that a lot more. And I think in particular, and I think this is important to frame a discussion about this film as well, I'm a really, really big fan. I don't think he's made a great film in about 25 years. Pre this film, and we'll talk about that in a second. And
I can't disagree more.
I was personally hugely disappointed with Prometheus. I thought it was a real nothing film. I thought it looked and sounded $1 million like everything that he touches and produces. I just thought it was a bit of a non-entity of a film in itself. And I guess
Me too, because I got confused by it.
well, yeah, and I guess a lot of the pre-release chatter about this film was that he'd potentially realised that he'd gotten a bit caught up in the sort of self-importance of the mythology and the backstory of the film, and that this was more a sort of return to Ridley Scott basics and the Alien basics, and the trailers certainly suggested this was a much more scaled back, pure Alien sci-fi horror piece, which
Like
is
the
what
first
Alien
one,
is.
like
Exactly, which
aliens
is-
in spooky corners, jumping out and
Yes.
killing people.
with real characters as well, because part of the revolutionary thing about the first Alien film was that, contrary to all of the science fiction being made at the time, which were these sort of larger-than-life kind of space opera swashbuckling films, this was this. You know, and he talks about how lucky he got when he lined up with H.R. Geiger to do the design. This was this beautifully designed, largely sort of naturalistic film about truck drivers in space with this terrifyingly real, visceral monster. No one had done anything like that before. And so I think a lot of the chatter before this film was that he was moving away from the kind of Prometheus human origin stories, backstory, and we can talk about that. I have sort of issues with that, and that this was going to be more of a scaled down, hardcore sci-fi horror actioner.
Well, if that's what the chatter was, and if that's what the trailers, because I don't watch trailers anymore, but if that's what the trailers implied, then he fooled us all. Because he fooled us all partly, because that is what the first 30 minutes is, and that is what the last 30 minutes is.
Yeah.
The first act and the last act are that. They are highly visually and orally amazing, scary, creepy action set pieces that are similar to kind of mostly like 70% Alien, the original, and 30% Aliens.
Yeah, yeah.
But the long second act, which I would suggest, if the film is 2 hours, I would suggest it's an hour of the film. The long second act is Prometheus 2. It answers Prometheus. It's meditative, it's slow, it's dialogue, it's mythological and world building.
It's pretty action heavy as well, though. Once it
There is
gets
action in it,
going
and there's
on
certainly
the
like,
planet.
you know, violence and killing.
Oh, absolutely.
About every
it's-
10 minutes in this film.
Yeah, it's really graphic. Okay, so here's a question. So if that was the backstory for this, do you think now, post Alien Covenant, he's made a really, really good film again?
Yeah.
Okay.
And not only that, because I agree with you, Prometheus was just mind-bogglingly good-looking and great sounding, with good acting as well, really good acting. Numa Rapace and, you know, and Michael Fassbender, of course, joining the franchise and sort of taking it over. But it baffled me, you know, and especially because of that prologue with the translucent, beefy white dudes and the water and the... I just really had no idea what the fuck was going on. And what I love about this film is I find that middle section to be so clear of this new film. It answers all of my questions. I find that he really has taken his time to make it super clear without making it stupid.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to go see Prometheus again, because it actually, to me, in retrospect, it makes Prometheus work. It's almost like Prometheus was like, okay, I know you don't understand, but just wait 5 years because you will. And that's what he's done with this. He has sort of auto-corrected or self-corrected.
I agree with that, but that's also my biggest problem with this film. I personally don't feel... I'm still of the opinion that he hasn't made a really, really good film in 25 years. I enjoyed this, but I found far too much of it derivative of especially the first two Alien films. All of the great set pieces in this are largely reproducing a kind of classic hits package.
He does do a lot of
very
callbacks.
Self-consciously often, and that's fun if you know the backstory and if you're really, really familiar with the films, and that's fun in and itself. But just it's not nearly as innovative and original. But my bigger problem with this is that I sometimes think not knowing all of the backstory of a story is more interesting, and having some gaps in the story and some of that backstory being an unexplained enigma is actually more interesting when everything is revealed. And when everything is revealed in this, and this is the film where the origins of the alien, of the xenomorph, is properly revealed, how they came about, who was responsible for engineering it, I didn't find the reveal in and of itself all that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you there. I've never in my life said, how did the aliens come into being?
Yeah.
You know, I love the movie Alien. I would suggest it's one of the films I have seen the most in my entire life. Like, I've easily seen it, you know, over 10 times. Easily. And I never once was like, wonder how they came into being. I just accepted the fact that there were these big aliens.
Well, and it's actually really intriguing the way that their backstory is sort of elliptically presented in the first two films. They're this perfect organism that is on this distant planet.
That's what Ash calls them in the first one,
Yeah, and it's a reference to the way that the Wayland Corporation refers to them throughout the first three films, and the David Fincher one as well, which is an underrated film, I think, Alien 3.
I haven't seen that one.
I don't mind Alien 3. I think it was given a bit of a tough
I quite
time.
liked Alien 4, the swimming alien
the Genet one. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, that's different.
The dolphin alien one.
And the other thing is, I'm with you. Alien as a film is, I think, the film that has scared the freaking pants off me more than anything else I've ever seen in my life. When I first saw that as about a 13-year-old, I was terrified for weeks.
Yeah. It's perfect.
It is.
I think it is a perfect film in there's not a second of that film that is wrong.
I agree. And again, one of my problems with this film is that as beautifully made as it is, it's not scary.
No, it's not scary.
It's graphic.
I agree.
It's not scary. And I think as soon as the action really gets going on the planet, and especially in the final reel, it feels a little bit rushed to me. There are a lot of references to the first two films and a lot of references to the life cycle of the alien, and it's quite relentless, and there's a lot of alien-human action. There's none of those beautiful, slow tension builds that you get in the original, or the James Cameron sequel. There's none of that meticulous craft in this film, really, for me. There's a lot of really great filmmaking, and the sequencing and the editing is beautiful, as is. But I kind of get the feeling sometimes that Ridley Scott can produce a film like this in his sleep.
Right.
You know, standing on his head.
I disagree that there's not. I mean, I think it's amazingly crafted. Once again, I think that's one of the things he can do as a director is make films that look and sound like nobody else. That they're just
I completely
they're perfectly
agree.
polished, and yet they also have ideas. They're not just action crazy pieces. That's why he is not Jerry Bruckheimer or Michael Bay or any of those. And yet they all come in his wake.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to get down to the thing of like, just because this isn't the film that you wanted doesn't mean that it's not a good film, because he has diverged from what you wanted. You know, because what he has decided to make is a grand universe, a grand mythology, and not worry so much. So I think he sort of like threw in the first act and the third act for maybe to sell the film, maybe to get money, maybe to, maybe for those trailers. But what he was really interested is the mythology, the world building. So if that's not what you want, then this isn't the film for you. I actually found, bizarrely enough, that the middle hour of this film, all of that stuff, that was my favourite part of this film.
Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, look, I didn't
Which is mainly Michael Fassbender being sneaky in a very cool way.
And he's great in this, actually.
He's great.
In a way that none of the other characters are really great. No. And there are some really good actors in this doing nothing. And I kept on waiting for Danny McBride to say something funny in this film. And it never happens. He has this frustratingly straight role that he sort of shackled with for the entire running time.
Here comes our first big spoiler. If you don't want a spoiler, turn off now. The two that survive are the one on the poster, of course, Catherine Waterston, and you see the poster, then you see the poster and it's her. You're like, well, she must make it in the third act. But the other one that survives, besides something else, besides Michael Fassbender, is Danny McBride, and that threw me for a loop because I just do not think he's a good enough actor for that. Like, if that had, that's the John C. Reilly role, and I kept thinking, if that was John C. Reilly, that would be so much better.
I really like Danny McBride, but just not in this kind of role. He looks really uncomfortable.
He did.
And he looks on screen. He can be such a genuinely funny performer in television and film. Yeah. He looks frustrated and like he wants to say something wacky and funny and subversive, and he's just never allowed to.
Yeah.
But look, what you're saying earlier, I don't know that I necessarily wanted a certain kind of film with this. It was just a certain kind of film was suggested early on, and I wasn't really interested whether or not that was delivered. I just ultimately felt that this was again a really well-made Ridley Scott vehicle that that ultimately has an uncomfortable combination of sort of by-the-numbers, well-made quality alien action, and this, I think, quite pretentious Prometheus-esque desire to force onto the Alien franchise this big philosophical search for the origins of mankind. And the pretentiousness thing really bugs me, both in this and Prometheus. And you even look at the titles. Prometheus was called Prometheus. This was called Alien Covenant. And the running title of this for a long time was Paradise Lost. I mean, I'm kind of half expecting the next one's going to be called, The Last Temptation of the Xenomorph or something,
And what's totally funny about that is that both Prometheus and Covenant are just the name of ships.
Yes.
They're both just simply the name of ships.
So
and yet they sound like, I'm like, Covenant, what does that even mean? Covenant, what? And it's just the name of a ship. I did ask myself, why is he doing this? He is 80. Why is he doing this? And the only explanation I can really come to, is that he was pissed off that the Alien movies got taken over by big business and became Alien versus Predator movies. And he literally was like, Alien is one of my crowning achievements. And not only that, it's a pride and joy of mine. I am going to wrench it back and make it Ridley Scott. And I think what defines Ridley Scott films, and let's sort of move on to him maybe, is that they have always been, since the very beginning, even The Duelists, his first film, and certainly Alien and Blade Runner, they've always been big, beautiful, mass-market, mainstream films that are also filled with an art house sensibility because they have all the sheen and all the action, but they also have ideas.
Yeah, and I think the ideas is a really important distinction of Ridley Scott as a sort of popular filmmaker. And that's why I don't particularly like anything he's done a lot. I see everything he does. I enjoy most of what he does, a few obvious exceptions, but I don't really think he's got the balance right between the visual stylistic approach and the ideas in about 30 years.
So you're suggesting about 30 years that he hasn't made a good film.
Even Gladiator, I think is a perfectly functional, high class piece of popcorn cinema that is pretty redundant ideas wise. I was always surprised by how well received that film is, and to me it's a mishmash of lots of fantastic sword and sandal films over the last sort of 60, 70 years, and it's great fun, and Russ is doing his Russ thing, but it's pretty impoverished on the ideas front in a way that a film like Blade Runner or Alien or Thelma and Louise just isn't. There are ideas running through every frame of those films.
I agree. I was amazed when Gladiator became what it became. I mean, I'm convinced it was going to make money.
Cultural phenomenon.
But it became a cultural phenomenon. I was amazed that it won Best Picture. I was amazed that Russell won Best Actor. I was like,
he's
what?
ridiculous in it.
Did I take mushrooms earlier? It so blew me away that happened to that film.
Yeah.
But come on, what about Black Hawk Down?
Yeah, Black Hawk Down is a really fascinating film. It's politically uncomfortable and neutral in a very, very strange way,
and so well made.
Well, yeah, and when we were talking about Ben Wheatley the other week, I mean, if you talk about the cinema as one continuous action piece, that film is at the top of the pile.
Yeah, it's just soldiers in
Somalia.
In Somalia, in a city, and it's just urban fighting, Mogadishu, and it's just urban fighting in Mogadishu for most of the movie, with some some setup and some come down at either end, and it is just the most visceral, tense action movie ever made.
And I remember
the stakes are so high because you like the characters. He sets them up really well.
Yeah, and I remember watching that film and thinking, how on earth do you storyboard this shit?
I know.
Like from start to finish. That's a fascinating film. I know that some people had issues with the politics, but regardless of that, as a piece of filmmaking, it's pretty endlessly fascinating, I think.
Okay, one for people that they might have seen much more recently than that. How can you deny that The Martian is a good film? The Martian is such a good time at the cinema.
Yeah,
it's fun, it's big, it's got a great central performance, it's full of ideas, it's pro-science, looks great, and I loved it. I wanted to get that guy back from Mars.
I enjoyed The Martian. I think The Martian is a pretty. Yeah, I remember you and I talked about this last year. It's a good, straightforward, populist sci-fi actioner, I guess.
It is him at his most mainstream.
Yeah. But I think this is an issue with this film as well. I actually think visually he's not quite the force that he once was as well. I was surprised by how flat The Martian was visually, and this is far less interesting visually than Prometheus. I think its predecessor.
Yeah, Prometheus really went there with the visuals.
Yeah.
But what I like about the visuals of this is that the ships look like models rather than CGI, and yet they don't look like models.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't look like 1977 Star Wars, where you can now tell that it's models. But it doesn't look like CGI. Somehow he's found this sweet spot.
Yeah.
And so they and the creature harken back to Alien, but the creature in Alien was animatronics. It was like a robot, it was a puppet, essentially.
Yeah. Or a guy in a suit towards the end.
Or a guy in a suit.
Yeah.
And this is CGI, and yet it feels like the first one, which to me is astonishing.
Yeah, and I think something else that he possibly gets into, I would argue, a slightly bad habit with this, although it's fun, is that it's similar to the post-Abrams Star Wars films. He's referencing his own visuals and using music continuously in this. And a lot of the architecture in the ship, for historical reasons as well, in the chronology of the films, is referencing the interiors of the spaceships in Alien and Aliens. The score is very heavy in references to the really excellent original Alien score, and even the title sequences. And I just think as a filmmaker, you can get too bogged down in that.
Well, he certainly name checks all the greatest hits of Alien. I mean, he has a chest burst.
Yeah.
He has a face hugger. Spoiler.
Yeah.
And he even starts the film with them waking up, albeit in a very different way.
Yeah.
So I must say, when I did start it, when the film started, I thought, oh my God, has he actually done A Force Awakens? Is he actually remaking his own movie?
Yeah.
Or, well, in this case, his own movie as opposed to Jack. But is he actually remaking the original? And then it didn't, obviously.
But I mean, don't you think that's a bit of a problem sometimes? And it's clear from the opening use of the letters in the title sequence that this is a film that is constantly self-referencing its own place in cinema history in every conceivable way, visually, thematically, musically, and sometimes I just and that's fun and that's enjoyable as an audience member or as a film geek who really knows the mythology and the previous films. But it just kind of straitjackets filmmakers and stops them, I think, sometimes from trying to do something a little bit more interesting with the source material.
Well, examining his motives, and it is hard to examine the motives of an 80-year-old knight who is one of the most successful and influential artists in the history of the world. It's almost like because he's letting someone else direct the Blade Runner sequel, and I'm sure he was offered it first.
Yeah.
He's still very active. He's still powerful. It's almost like he's decided that if he has to choose his legacy, because he probably only has 20 years left on this earth, and let's hope he has 20.
Yeah.
He chose Alien over Blade Runner.
Yeah.
He's like, this is what I'm going to make my
right.
legacy.
Although, don't you think I find the choice of director for the Blade Runner sequel really, really interesting, because I think that is a filmmaker.
I'm not a fan of Denis Villeneuve.
But regardless, and I'm sort of largely agnostic as well, but he is quite a similar filmmaker to Ridley Scott in that he has this incredibly distinctive visual and cinematic approach, and that often his content lags a little bit behind, a bit like Ridley Scott over the last 30 years.
Arrival kind of looked like Prometheus.
Yeah.
Like it kind of borrowed the colour palette of Prometheus.
Really borrows the colour palette from Fury Road as well. Again, the preview does anyway.
Yeah, Denis Villeneuve obviously follows in the footsteps of Ridley Scott and George Miller. I mean, obviously. He would put his hand up and say, yeah. So, come on, what about some others that I must argue against? I mean, I did not...
Come on, hit me.
Okay. The Counselor was the worst film ever made. So
The Counselor.
Oh my God,
that was a mess. Look, I think if you look, there are
what about
a lot
American
of,
Gangster?
And I was about to name that. There are just far too many rote, middling, by the numbers Ridley Scott actioners in there.
He does churn them out.
Body of Lies.
I loved Body of Lies.
It's fine. American Gangster.
I liked.
Nothing Robin Hood prequel.
Yeah,
what on
yes,
earth was
there are some dogs in there.
Kingdom of Heaven, Orlando Bloom's last film in a lead role. I think it just killed his career.
Kingdom of Heaven, obviously. Exodus, Gods and Kings, obviously. The Counselor, obviously.
Wow, Exodus,
and
Gods
of course, we haven't even mentioned A Good Year.
I was going to say,
which was literally, they even fessed up to it. It was literally Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott admitting that they had such a good time making Gladiator together, and they both wanted to spend a summer in France together. So they made A Good Year to basically spend a summer in France drinking wine together.
It's not a good time. It's 2 hours of your life you will never get back, ever.
I thought Matchstick Men was interesting.
Yeah, actually, and that's a really unusual, small
scale.
Yeah, actually, you know what? That's probably the film, if I'm honest, I have liked the most that he's made. Possibly this would be the next one. It's not an earth-shakingly good film, but it's a well-crafted, interesting film in the context of most of what he's done over the last years. But look, here's the other thing about Ridley Scott, I think. So he's 80 now, right? I see Ridley Scott as one of the sort of last great professionals. And we talked about it a little bit again when we were talking about Ben Wheatley. The man just likes to work in that kind of, I know he's British, but in that kind of classical Hollywood. And people talk about Clint Eastwood being another of the last professionals. Tarantino and most of the current film generation make about a film every 4 or 5 years. People like Eastwood and Scott are kind of the last of that sort of John Ford generation of people who are uncomfortable being referred to as an artist. They see themselves as craftsmen, and they just like working. And I'm not saying they're not artists. I'm just saying that they have a very old school, old Hollywood big studio disciplined approach to work, and they just churn it out. And I really admire that. You know,
I mean, really, to me, at the end of the day, it's not even Eastwood. It's Spielberg and Sir Ridley that are on the same in the same
But
glove.
but-
because they both can churn them out, you know. Spielberg famously does like 2 every 3 years.
Yeah.
They both
that's true.
get
Yeah.
Oscar nominations.
Yeah.
They both do big mass market movies that are full of ideas.
Yeah.
And they just know how to use special effects and sound and post-production
they're filmmakers.
in a way that other people don't.
Yeah, absolutely. In a way that other, I guess, populist filmmakers of the later 20th century generation just don't. Yeah, no,
And they've influenced
completely
each
agree.
other.
Yes.
Along the way, every step of the way.
And regardless of what you say about Spielberg, he's another visual stylist that I think when he's gone, we will miss more possibly than we realise. Yeah, and both of their bodies of works are inconsistent. And to an extent, that's how it should be. You know, you work on your craft and you produce and take it or leave it.
They don't like being at home.
Yeah,
They go from
really.
set to set, you know,
Ridley
set to
Scott
pre-production to
literally-
set, you know, like...
And he's already in pre-production for his Battle of Britain film,
I know,
which
Battle of Britain.
could be fun.
I'll see it.
Ridley Scott and Spitfires, what's not to like?
Now let's talk, once again, spoiler, 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 let's talk about this elephant in the room. The actual lead in terms of screen time of this movie, even though the protagonist is Catherine Waterston's character, the person with the most screen time by far is Michael Fassbender, partly because he plays 2 roles. The entire second act of the movie, which as we've said is very long, is basically mostly him and other people come into his orbit. A lot of it is scenes between him and himself, between David and Walter.
The two
between him and
androids.
himself.
Yeah.
And it's a remarkable performance because both of them are androids or cyborgs or whatever they're called in this universe.
Yeah.
Both of them have that straight posture and that very robotic thing. And yet he manages to subtly make them both distinctive. And it's incredible how he does that. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's a really...
Because you can always tell which one's which.
It's a really, really good thing that Fassbender is in this film with these 2 roles because personally I found the rest of the cast batshit boring and anodyne to a T in terms of the characters.
Yeah.
He's
Catherine Waterston,
great.
who decided that she was interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And clearly he's trying to do this Ripley Sigourney Weaver thing and it just doesn't work for me.
Actually, I quite liked the Billy Crudup guy who had to become the captain.
He's quite a sad character.
Very sad, like very, very different to the Tom Skerritt.
Yes.
Even though facially he looks a little
Yeah.
like Tom Skerritt in Alien, but very different because Tom Skerritt knew what he had to do, whereas this guy is a Christian and always questioning his faith, or he's a religious person
And he's
anyway.
rubbish as well. And again, in contrast,
he's terrible
to
at his job.
And in contrast to the Tom Skerritt captain, who's a good, interesting captain and clearly a very capable leader, the Billy Crudup character is hopeless. And quite a forlorn, tragic. I don't mind Billy Crudup generally. He's the second most interesting of the humans, I think. But
it's Fassbender's film.
Chews through the scenes that he's with, you know, and his accent work is a hoot. And
his accent work is a hoot because
It
one of
is.
them's got an American accent, one of them's got a British accent. At the beginning, it's revealed that Walter is created by Guy Pearce, and Guy Pearce, as far as I could tell, just has his normal Australian accent because, of course...
No, he has that ridiculous kind of faux English accent again at the beginning. Yeah,
I couldn't quite tell.
It's a bit silly, although I did really like, and that's this shot.
It is a bit silly.
It is a bit silly, and that is this shot. Although it's really, really over the top, and it's this very kind of exaggerated Kubrickian sequence that kind of frames the film. I did really enjoy it.
Oh, me too. I loved it because I just wanted to live in that house with that view.
Nothing in the rest of the film quite lives up to the bonkersness of that opening sequence.
I know, it's
and
crazy.
it does frame the rest of the action of the film as well.
And are we to assume, spoiler alert, that Fassbender's Walter kills him at the end of that scene?
It's suggested,
It's
isn't
suggested,
it?
He's like, bring me some water, Walter.
Yep.
Something like that.
Guy, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Okay, finally, if you haven't left yet, this is a real big spoiler. This is the end of the film.
Yeah, go on.
Fassbender's bad robot, Walter, wins and kills all of the crew. And so what we're left with is the remaining colonists, about 1,996 of them, and evil Fassbender heading off to colonize a new world.
And a couple of face-hugger embryos put away in the...
And a couple of face-hugger embryos.
Put away in the freezer next to the ice creams.
So you're talking about a man who is now 80, so he must have been, well, we know when he shot it because he shot it in Sydney. So he was 79 when he shot it. He shot it last year. We're talking about a man who's 79 who literally ends his most recent franchise entry on a cliffhanger.
Well, and remember, he has publicly said...
It's a cliffhanger.
Absolutely, and he has publicly said over the last 6 months that he's going to do two
more.
He's got 2 more.
I hope he doesn't smoke.
Which worries me a little bit because
Well, you know, Denis Villeneuve, I suppose, if, gosh forbid, Sir Ridley bites it,
Yeah.
I guess Denis Villeneuve will have it in his contract that he takes over.
Let's hope that Ridley goes on forever and gives us 2 more. But I'm a little bit worried about getting bored with the continuation of
this one
story.
kind of ends it, doesn't it?
Well,
it wraps
and again,
it up.
look, and you know, we've been talking about this. Ultimately, this is a sort of greatest hits mashup of the better Alien
And
films.
these are prequels too. So
Yes,
this one
yes.
actually does lead to Alien.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You
Although
don't
there's
need
still
another one in between.
I could still see how he'd want to kind of flesh out and kind of puff up the story a bit, which I assume is what he's going to do, because he's also very publicly said no Alien 5, not happening. There's going to be nothing after the Genet Alien Resurrection. So he has committed to
He won't leapfrog them all. Right.
No, these are a continuation of the story in Alien Covenant. So there are still things clearly that he wants to tell us between the end of this and Tom Skerritt getting the distress call in Alien.
Well, he's got about 1,997 colonists that he can kill off with those 2 embryos.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you know, at the end of the second film, it would be good because of the godlike attributes, you know, the god lust that Walter, the android, has. Yeah. It would be good to see him, like, I don't know, fall into a volcano or something.
Well, like Ridley, like
blow up into a black hole.
Well, Sigourney's. Oh, you haven't seen Alien 3. Can I spoil Alien 3 for you on television? Right. So at the climax of Alien 3, Ripley swan dives into molten steel lava.
You're kidding?
Yes. And mid swan dive, a queen alien bursts out of her chest. You know this in advance. That is the end and conclusion of the last official Alien story.
Right, so Walter has to top that, which sounds like the greatest death ever filmed.
But look, what do you think about this? This is, I guess, my ultimate problem with this film. So Ridley Scott, once upon a time, 1979, made this small, incredible science fiction film called Alien, right? It was full of these fantastic ideas. It had this beautiful, meticulous life cycle of the alien that he designed with H.R. Giger.
In effect, the best slasher movie ever made.
Absolutely, and H.R. Giger was clearly a gift from God, and the combination of him and Ridley Scott created the Alien concept. It's a great film. Does it actually have the ideas to sustain this many films? Like, by the end of this film, which again is largely just the greatest hits compilation of what they've already done, I'm really worried about how you prolong the interest for another 2 films.
No, there's no way that they had all this plotted out then. This is obviously retrofitting, just in the same way that George Lucas claims that he had 9 written. He didn't have 9 written. We know that now. He probably had big ideas, but not even that. There's no way they thought that thing was going to go on like this. That was
George Lucas was in the pub one night and thought putting episode 4 at the beginning of a film is a really interesting way to start a space opera, and he worked from there. I'm sure that's
I don't think George Lucas drinks.
Opinion,
I think if he drinks 1 glass of wine that costs like $600 a glass.
He's too weird to drink.
Yeah, I think he eats like Cheetos or, you know, like I think he's very like, you know, mass market American taste. We are way off subject. But we'll wrap this up since we probably won't get to Sir Ridley again for a while. You can only take one to your desert island. Which Ridley do you take?
It would be an absolute toss a coin between Blade Runner and Alien and I think I would go with Alien.
I would go with Alien.
Actually.
I love them both. They're both crazy influential, but I think Alien's perfect, and I think Blade Runner is 1% out of 100 off perfect.
I agree. I'm very passionate about them both. I think Alien as an innovative piece of cinema history shades it.
I need you back here right now. I need you.
Okay, baby, just calm down, sweetheart. Calm down.
Tell me to calm down.
You're breaking up.
All of this to start our new life.
Alien Covenant is out now in Australia and some other parts of the world, not opening in the United States for a week. It's certainly a watch this from me.
Yeah, just watch this from me.
You've been watching Watch This. I'm CJ Johnson, joined by Jim Flanagan. Take care.
Watch that, watch this, and I'll die.